Prominent Columbia County Republican Roger Miner this evening received a call from President Reagan. The federal district court judge got the call in his Albany office where Reagan informed Miner he was nominating him as a federal appeals court judge. Miner tonight says that he is elated his nomination.
The U.S. District Judge may be getting up in the judicial world after a recent call from the White House. Lance Wheeler has more on what may be ahead for the career of U.S. District Judge Roger Miner.
The call from the President of the United States came after a long day at his chambers in Albany.
The President told me that he was about to sign a paper that he thought I'd like to know about, and it was my nomination to the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit.
Judge Roger Miner is the first judge from the 32-county Northern District to be named to the appeals court. He will hear cases from federal courts in New York, Connecticut, and Vermont. President Reagan called Judge Miner from Camp David just minutes after getting off Air Force One.
I was awestruck, as most people are, I guess, when the President gets on the phone. And I was very thrilled and excited, and I hope that I was able to respond to him in an intelligent way.
Lance Wheeler, News Center 6, Hudson.
Judge Miner is a 51-year-old Republican. He is a Hudson native who got his start in public life as Hudson's Corporation Counsel in 1961. He later served as Columbia County District Attorney, and in 1976 was elected as a Supreme Court judge in the state's 3rd Judicial District. President Reagan appointed Judge Miner to the federal bench in 1981. Albany County U.S. District Judge Roger Miner of Hudson may be moving on to bigger and better things after a call from the White House this afternoon. The 51-year-old judge began his career as Hudson's Corporation Counsel in 1961, then moved on to the post of District Attorney. In 1976, he became a Supreme Court judge in the state's 3rd Judicial District. Then the President appointed him to the federal bench 4 years ago. Now President Reagan has called Judge Miner to say he's been nominated to the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, where he'll hear cases from New York, Connecticut, and Vermont.
Awestruck, as most people are, I guess, when the President gets on the phone. And I was very thrilled and excited, and I hope that I was able to respond to him in an intelligent way.
Well, it looks like state.
Federal District Court Judge Roger Miner has been confirmed as a Circuit Court of Appeals judge. The U.S. Senate unanimously approved President Reagan's nomination of Miner today. The former state Supreme Court Justice and Columbia County District Attorney will be sworn into his new office on September 14th. Miner's father will administer the oath. And coming up...
It was the day many people in Washington thought that Judge Robert Bork might ask the president to withdraw Bork's nomination to the Supreme Court. But instead, Bork went to the Justice Department to discuss his situation with Attorney General Edwin Meese. Bork's family appears to want him to give up the bloody fight, but White House sources say Bork wants to launch a counterattack against his Democratic opponents if the White House backs him. But more than 50 senators have publicly announced they will vote against Bork. And while the votes stack up against him, a Bork supporter blamed the president for relaxing in California this summer.
You can't take off the month of August, particularly when first time in a generation we have an opportunity to change the direction of the Supreme Court.
And a Republican leader in the Senate scoffed at the idea of launching a campaign for Bork now.
Said they're going to have a rally tomorrow. Well, a little late for a rally.
White House officials say they've already begun considering who to name next if Bork doesn't make it.
And on the rather short list of possible nominees to the court is a local man from Columbia County. Washington sources tell the 30-Minute News that U.S. Appeals Court Judge Roger Miner is one of a small number of candidates who will be considered for the nomination if Robert Bork withdraws his name. U.S. Senator Al D'Amato today said it is clear that Bork cannot be confirmed. D'Amato offered Miner as an alternative. D'Amato says Miner could be confirmed if he's nominated. In the Senate
Judge Bork, a judge from Columbia County, was one of 7 original barristers President Reagan considered for a Supreme Court nomination. Now that the Bork confirmation is in jeopardy, Judge Roger Miner is once again being mentioned as a possible appointee. DiNicola visited Miner's hometown where he talked with people who knew him as a boy.
U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Roger Miner was 4 years old when Margaret Harms came to work for his father, Abram.
His father told me that he wanted to be a lawyer from the time he was a small child. Excellent reputation. And there's not one person I know of that ever spoke against him. He was a very brilliant attorney. Once they came, they always came again.
One of Miner's first jobs was as local district attorney.
My brother was a police investigator with BCI. He always said that he was the best DA they ever had in Hudson.
Judge Miner lives in Hudson with his wife. They have 4 boys. Until President Reagan announces a decision, he is declining comment. When he was sworn into his present position 6 years ago, Judge Miner said that the most important qualities for a judge are patience and understanding. Not too much different from the inscription in his high school yearbook, which said, "Slow down, don't run." Beatrice Hickey, who works in the high school guidance department, was his high school classmate.
He was a good all-around person.
But was he ambitious? You know how some people can be ambitious in kind of an obnoxious way?
No, not Roger.
Martin Belsky, Dean of Albany Law School, is a liberal Democrat who could not support Judge Bork. But Belsky thinks Miner, who was a conservative, would make an excellent candidate.
He's interested in the judicial system. He's taken his own private time to work with young lawyers and lawyers recently out in practice to help them learn advocacy skills. And Judge Miner has had experience as a trial judge and as an appellate judge, but he's also an intellectual in the sense he's written a number of articles, and I've read them all, and they're quite good.
If President Reagan taps Judge Miner for the Supreme Court opening, he will have been the 2nd Columbia County native this year to face Senate questioning. The other person, Oliver North. From Albany, DiNicola, News Center 6.
Still ahead on News Center.
Mario Cuomo is not interested in making the trip from Albany to Washington, D.C. An area judge has an outside chance at it. Judge Roger Miner was in Washington to address the Conservative Heritage Foundation. He serves on the Court of Appeals in Albany. He's being called by an authority on the Supreme Court, one of the leading candidates for a spot on that high court. Bruce Fine, who has close ties to the Reagan administration and is a former assistant attorney general, says there's a 50-50 chance that one of the justices will resign from the high court because of advancing age or increased workloads. If that happens, Fine says Miner is a possible contender.
I think he's a man of great resolution. He's a man of great integrity and a man of a great scholarship in the area. And perhaps for some of those reasons, I think his confirmation process might be a little less, I want to say, impassioned than some other nominees. But certainly Judge Roger Miner stands for all of the judicial restraint principles that Judge Robert Bork and President Reagan stand for.
Apparently a man to watch.
Quite a recommendation.
Yes.
Speaking of...
County DA is among those being considered for the latest opening on the U.S. Supreme Court. Lance Wheeler has more.
News Center 6 has learned that Hudson-born Roger Miner is now one of 3 being considered by President Reagan to fill the vacancy of Justice Powell. Last February, News Center 6 reported from Washington that speculation about such a vacancy was centered around the former Columbia County DA, state Supreme Court judge, and now federal appeals judge Roger J. Miner. Bruce Fine, an authority on the Supreme Court who has close ties to the Reagan administration, said he feels the list is down to 3, including Miner.
I would put Judge Roger Miner of the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. I think he's a man of great resolution. He's a man of great integrity and a man of a great scholarship in the area. And perhaps for some of those reasons, I think his confirmation process might be a little less, I want to say, impassioned than some other nominees.
Fine reiterated his thoughts on Miner last night on public television. Lance Wheeler, News Center 6, Hudson.
Jazz Love. To confirm or reject Souter's nomination. A decision could come by early fall. That would be in time for the start of the new Supreme Court session, which begins October 2nd. Ernie and Tracy. All right,
Okay,
thanks,
Marianne. Thank you.
Marianne.
You're
welcome. Well, one local U.S. Circuit Court judge may be disappointed tonight, but relieved that the nomination has finally been announced. Roger Miner was reportedly one of the final 3 candidates President Bush was considering for that job.
Well, I must admit that there's always some tension in knowing that your name is being advanced and possibly being considered for the Supreme Court. And I suppose it's good to know that the decision has been made and that that tension is over.
Judge Miner's wife, in the meantime, was apparently interested in moving to Washington. She says she wishes President Bush had made a different selection, but will continue to support the president in any move he makes. Ernie?
Well, Tracy...
Were you disappointed?
Oh, I was disappointed because I didn't have any great expectations. So you can't be really disappointed if you don't know that something is coming.
They would assume that there had to be a lot of anticipation, knowing that one of the justices had retired, or had tendered his resignation on Friday. But there was always that hope, wasn't there?
Well, you can't say that there's any hope. If you're the only time that we know that we're being considered is if somebody in the Washington press says we are. So I don't put a heck of a lot of stock in that either. You know, you can't always rely on the media to give you the straight story.
Were you surprised? Were you surprised at who the president is nominating?
Well, Judge Souter has been mentioned from time to time. I think he was, toward the end of the Reagan administration, he was on the list. I was somewhat surprised, although not totally surprised, that that he was to be nominated.
You must have got a lot of support the past 2 to 3 days from people who know you and thought that you very well should have been the candidate, should have been his choice.
I'm flattered that a number of people saw fit to recommend me to the president, and that is always a nice thing to know, that people think that you're qualified for the job. But you know that the president has a number of factors that he must consider when he appoints a justice of the Supreme Court. All of the people, I think, who ever are considered for the job are well qualified, certainly, for the position. I was rated well qualified by the American Bar Association when I was appointed to the court I'm on, and I know that a lot of the other candidates received similar ratings. So the considerations that the president takes into account, besides legal qualifications, are many, and it's hard to tell which is the most important in his mind at any one time. He has geographical considerations, ethnic considerations, he has ideological, philosophical considerations. All these enter into the calculus, and so at any one time it's difficult to predict what will best serve the president's needs the best in appointing qualified people. I don't think he has any shortage of qualified people. His problem is a little bit different. His problem is one of those considerations that I mentioned to you, including political, policy type considerations. Many, many kinds of things enter into the determination.
Okay, let me just ask Jackie a couple of questions. Is there? How would you describe your own mood past 3 or 4 days?
I've been very busy.
A lot of phone calls?
Yes.
What do people say when they call?
Well, people called from all over the country wanting to know what they could do to help the process along. My husband had a lot of support throughout the country. Many friends of the president, United States senators, congressmen, cabinet members, a lot of people supported him.
What did they say? I mean, you talked about support. How broad was the support? Where were they from?
The support was extremely broad. In fact, if you saw some of the comments in the newspaper, you saw that some of the people from the very far right, namely Bruce Fine, who's a well-known conservative person, said some very nice things about my husband in the paper yesterday. And on the other hand, Arthur Lyman, who was a very liberal Democrat in New York City, well-known lawyer, said some very, very nice things. And his support was very broad-based. But we didn't live in New Hampshire.
Judge Miner's name has been brought up on, what, 2 or 3 occasions as being a possible nominee.
I think this was probably the second really serious consideration.
Have we, will we hear the name of Judge Miner again in those circles?
It's difficult to say.
Appointment we'll have. Got to tell him everything twice.
What? No, I was just thinking about something on this. I was thinking about the joke is what I was thinking of. What effect, if any, will have the next appointee have on the Supreme Court? Generally, the decisions of late have been relatively close, 5-4.
It's hard to say at this point because so little is known about Judge Soter's views. As you know, he was a judge of the New Hampshire Supreme Court and only has served for a few months on the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And of course, the state court handles cases that are somewhat different from what we handle in the federal appeals courts. We handle a number of constitutional questions, civil rights, civil liberties that sometimes they don't get to. So it's hard to say how he will vote on some of these cases at this point because he doesn't have a lot of writings out there, decisions, articles like Judge Bork had. And Judge Bork, of course, was questioned at great length about the things he had written in the past. You don't have that with Judge Soter. So I think that although it's hard to tell how he'll go, obviously he's going to make a difference. It's true that there have been a lot of cases that have been decided by 5-4 margins and in recent years. And it's interesting that at the beginning of the Republic, most of the decisions of the Supreme Court were per curiam. That is, they were unanimous decisions. And I think that it causes a great deal of problem to have 5-4 decisions in the court because it's a divisive thing. People seem to think that all they have to do is to change a justice to change the law. And I don't think that's the way it should be. Holmes said that it's better that the law be certain than that it be correct, so that people would know what the law was and how to guide themselves by it. I don't think 5-4 decisions have been a good thing. And I'm hopeful that that will change in the future. Whether the new justice will bring about that change is hard to predict at this point.
Are you glad this 2 or 3 days is over?
Well, I must admit that there's always some tension in knowing that your name is being advanced and possibly being considered for the Supreme Court. And I suppose it's good to know that the decision has been made and that that tension is over.
Jackie, you're going to meet with the president on Tuesday. Do you expect to talk to him at all about the recent decision?
No, not really. I've been a supporter of George Bush for a long time. I'm still a supporter of George Bush, and I'll continue to be a supporter of George Bush.
Do you wish, though, that he may have, deep down in your heart, I would assume that you wish he'd made a different selection?
Of course.
Calling him a liar an unprincipled and untrustworthy man. Those charges come from former Republican U.S. Senate candidate Jackie Miner, who, as our Doug Myers reports, is now considering forming a Republicans for Koch committee in efforts to ensure Lou Lehrman never becomes governor of New York State.
Consider that.
Jackie Miner was one of 4 persons seeking the Republican nomination to run for U.S. Senate against Daniel Patrick Moynihan. She says Lou Lehrman gave her his word at this Republican convention last month that he would not lobby for any of the candidates. But she says Lehrman broke his word and backed Florence Sullivan for the race.
Lou Lehrman is the most unprincipled, untrustworthy man that I have ever come across in 30 years of politics. I have been active in the Republican Party for 30 years, and I have never, ever come across a man that could look you in the eye and lie to you the way Lou Lehrman can.
When this picture was taken, Jackie Miner was vice chairman of Lehrman's statewide campaign. She has now quit and is now supporting Paul Kern for the Republican nomination. She says Kern has an uphill fight. But Jackie Miner is now laying the groundwork for a major split in the state Republican Party, a move to shift support to Democratic candidate Ed Koch if Paul Kern loses the Republican primary.
I've been a Republican for 30 years, and I've never done anything against the Republican Party. But if Lou Lehrman is the Republican nominee, I have a real decision to make. I am considering, and I stress I am only considering, forming a statewide Republicans for Koch organization.
Why?
I don't believe that I can ever support Lou Lehrman. I don't trust him. The man is not trustworthy. His word means nothing. And I just don't believe that I can ever do it.
Republicans for Koch will not surprise the mayor. He was informed of Jackie Miner's idea right after the Republican convention. And Action News has learned Koch has written Miner saying he is looking forward to working with her following the primary. Jackie Miner says she is aware her potential support of Ed Koch for governor could mean political suicide. But she says it's a matter of conscience, saying she cannot go to the people who trust her, saying she supports Lou Lehrman. Doug Myers, TV 10 Action.
A convicted drug smuggler is handed one of the stiffest sentences ever. Tough words and one of the toughest sentences ever handed out were given to a convicted drug smuggler in Albany federal court this morning. The Pakistani national had been convicted of selling $2 million worth of heroin to federal agents at 2 Albany restaurants last winter. 2 other men who also pleaded guilty went to jail. Here's more from Larry Barr.
The longest sentence, 18 years, went to Chawardi Anwar, a Pakistani national convicted on all of the narcotics charges. The federal prosecutor says he was the prime force behind the plot to sell these 26 ounces of high-quality heroin in this area. Anwar allegedly arranged to have the heroin shipped from Pakistan to Albany, and he hatched the plot to sell it with the 2 other defendants. Anwar was the only member of the trio who went to trial, claiming he was an innocent businessman. Before sentencing Anwar, Judge Roger Miner told him that he was sure that Anwar's real business was distributing heroin. And then he added, "I think the evidence is clear that you are the major distributor in this area."
I maintain I'm not guilty. I've been dragged into this situation.
Anwar, a resident alien, also complained to the judge that his constitutional rights had been violated several times. That angered Miner, who shot back, "When you tell me you didn't get a fair shake in this country, I can't buy it. You've been afforded every right there is." And then the judge offered that his own law clerk would file Anwar's notice of appeal. The 2 other men, Burton Hunter of East Greenbush in front, and James Grieco, the man with the beard, had pleaded guilty to 2 of the 4 charges. And they testified at Anwar's trial. Hunter, who said he got involved to help support a $1,000 a week cocaine habit, got 6 years. And Grieco, a successful businessman, whom the judge blasted as greedy, got 9 years and a $30,000 fine. All 3 must serve at least a third of their sentences. Larry Barr, 13 News at the Albany Federal Court.